Hello everyone, Michael Martin back from the frozen tundra of Boston, Massachusetts, where I was out there hanging out at PAX for the weekend. Yeah, it was the same weekend as Killer Instinct World Cup and Final Round. Congrats to Sleep, congrats to Cien. You guys did an excellent job in those respective tournaments, and of course everyone else in all the tournaments at Final Round. But I know there's some things you want to talk about. There's things I want to talk about. Specifically, we finally got word that a patch is coming to Street Fighter V. Now, the patch will, of course, come late April. Still going to be some tournaments that take place before that patch hits. But I know you want to talk about some things. I know you want to hear what I think about the patch overall and how it affects some of the characters. I reached out to some of my fighting game community industry friends for their take on the patch. So stick around for that. The biggest changes, the jump throw option select. That's going to affect some players. I see a lot of complaints on Twitter, and let's be real, most of you don't even use it. At least not, I think, the way it I don't use it. So it's not being eliminated, it's being changed, and I think the general consensus is it's possible to still use it. The timing may be more difficult. Overall, I'm not sure it's going to affect the game as much as some people are complaining that it will. The other interesting change that's happening, this is to the system, not the specific characters, is the change to DPs. Yes, some invincibility is coming back, but I'm not going back to Ryu. We'll get to that in a second, because they're not getting the full invincibility. It seems like if you read the text in the Capcom Unity post, it seems like they saw some issues with the characters that have Dragon Punches dealing with things like jump-ins. Something I've noticed playing Ryu is I feel like in the middle of a match, I hit my Shoryuken, but I get hit out of it, or I trade hits with my opponent. And I always thought that was kind of weird. I felt like, okay, maybe my timing's off, but apparently that was a thing. So that's being addressed. Basically, overall, some of those moves are being addressed so that you can use them, I guess, better, but not in a situation where if you're knocked down, you get that free meterless reversal. I don't know that it's a world changer. So, moving on. Let's talk some specifics, some characters. I don't want to go through the whole roster. I just want to touch on some highlights. I think Akuma gaining health and Balrog losing a little health is a pretty good idea. I don't think it changes how players will approach those characters, both playing those characters and playing against. Fundamentally, they're still the same. Some of the interesting decisions Capcom made as far as buffs or nerfs. Cammy was pretty much widely considered to be the #1 character towards the end of Season 1. And for the most part, she got buffed. She has an air throw now. Apparently Capcom felt her moveset wasn't complete. And she also gained, I believe, some a hitbox on her EX dive kicks. I'm not sure why she needed more. I don't know that these changes specifically make it so that players can make her more interesting. It seems like every Cammy player, for the most part, plays her the same way. So I don't know what the thought process there is. She's already strong. She's arguably stronger. We're probably going to see a lot more Cammys in Season 2. We're probably going to see players switching from their Season 1 mains, their strong Season 1 mains, by the way, maybe the Karens, maybe the Chuns, over to Cammy. Fang got buffed. Fantastic. Sort of. He's back to what it seems like maybe his Season 1 version. They added some frames to a lot of his normals in the first update for Season 2, and it looks like they are now reverting that, taking some of those frames away, obviously making his attacks faster. That's an interesting move, but I don't think that makes Fang great, and Cien, who I spoke to recently, also doesn't think that makes him great. Ibuki went largely untouched in this new update, so Cien doesn't plan on changing back to Fang. He's going to stick with Ibuki. I think that's the right move, but at least Fang's more viable. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Fang in top 8s this year. Guile, interestingly, seemed to be reverted back to his Season 1 status. He was fairly strong in Season 1 as people got to know him better. Season 2 came out, and he was considered by many to be the top character in the game, maybe next to Urian or Ibuki. And it remains to be seen if that will stay the same. But overall, I think Guile's going to be pretty strong. I'll touch on Zangief and Alex real quick. Both those characters got buffs. Alex desperately, just like Fang, Alex desperately needed them, so that's a good thing. I believe he also got extra health. But Zangief is an interesting case. Zangief got a new counter that is specifically for horizontal kicks, and he has a new neutral jumping attack. Zangief's a pretty strong character, so I'm not sure if he needed more. It sounds like his Lariat was also nerfed a bit for players to deal with that, but it's interesting to me that Zangief would get these new movesets and these new attacks. So I'm really curious to see how that affects the game. But lastly, I want to talk about Ryu and Kolin specifically. I've had people tweet at me asking me after these patch notes came out, are you switching back to Ryu? Not a chance. I don't want to go through that struggle. And I've talked about this with a lot of people, but the only reason I played Ryu is because I didn't connect with any other character in the game. I stuck with Ryu because I figured, well, fundamentally, he's Street Fighter, right? Well, fundamentally, I don't know that necessarily works in Street Fighter V. This game is so offensive heavy, and I think defense just comes from offense. So with Ryu, he got some range back on his standing light kick, standing medium punch, and of course that Shoryuken upgrade, but it's just not enough. He still lacks the damage and a little bit of the stun that they took away. I think that if they had removed the invincibility but left his damage, I would have been okay with that. Or if they had left his removed the damage but left his invincibility, that would have been a good option as well. So Kolin is not touched in this patch, and I feel like that's probably because she's just too new and they don't want to mess with her just yet. Kolin is fun. If you follow me on Twitter, at Bizarro_Mike1Z2Rs, you have seen me talk a lot about it. I love Kolin. I love the way she plays. She's interesting. I've never played a character like her before. That's why I'm not going back to Ryu. So overall, I think the patch looks good. I think we're going to see how, of course, it's early. We're going to see how everything evolves just like we did last year. And it's good that we get this patch sort of out of the way early because I want to see how the game evolves throughout the year. And as long as Capcom sees fit to leave it alone, I think that's a great thing. All right, enough from me. Let's hear from Born Free.
Hey guys, Born Free here. I thought I'd offer maybe a sort of an alternative universe patch reaction. It's more of a marketing thing, actually. The reality is E-League this year is a huge marketing opportunity for Capcom, and I think really what they want in the finals is probably some of the more interesting characters to watch, and I think those characters are some of the newer sort of DLC characters like Akuma or Kolin or Urian, Ibuki, all those characters are like hype. I think people, what makes people hype is seeing like crazy combos and all that sort of stuff. My concern is that Cammy has been buffed big time, it looks like on paper, and I'll get some hate for this, I'm sure, but at a lower level, she is not that interesting to watch. She's a very basic character, and I don't think she's that hype, and it concerns me. I know from a purist perspective that should not be something that should be considered in a balance patch, but from a business perspective, which would help grow the FGC by bringing in new people, we want E-League finals to be as hype as possible. And I guess we're lucky that we have characters like K-Brad to offset the boringness of Cammy. Sorry, guys.
Born Free. For those of you that don't know, you should check out our interview recently on Conversations and Fireballs. We did a great interview. I love talking with Born Free because he has an interesting perspective on fighting games and sort of, I guess, what Capcom's doing as a whole. He comes from an advertising marketing background, so he kind of has a perspective that most of us don't have when it comes to Street Fighter V. The idea that there are interesting characters in the game, and we will see more, hopefully, see more interesting characters in the game as they come out in DLC and whatnot, or as we've seen players sort of get better. Shannon Ibuki, Kolin, a lot of the DLC characters, Urien, they're interesting and it's hype. I mean, it's great watching what the Laura even. I mean, look, people may hate what Laura's doing. People hated what Armika was doing last year, but they're interesting characters. They provide an interesting narrative in tournaments. So to his point, Born Free talking about Cammy being very basic, and despite her additions, I don't think that players are really going to approach her any differently. I should say her buffs when I'm talking about additions. I think it's interesting that, like at final round in the top 64, there were 8 players that used Cammy. We're seeing a trend where, of course, a lot of players are playing the top tier characters. But Cammy was great last year, and she's going to be great this year. And more players, I think, are going to go to Cammy. And I kind of get where he's coming from, where she's boring. And if we see more of that, we saw that in Street Fighter 4 in the last year when everyone was playing Elena.
One of my 3 big takeaways are I really like the halfway measure they've taken with the DP change. I think that with the debut of Season 2, they kind of over-nerfed them, and I'm a person who's always been very outspoken at saying that I think that invincible reversals are kind of a crutch that, makes the game more brain dead and less interesting. So, but even by my standards, I think what they did was a little bit too much. Now having each version of a character's meterless DP kind of be invincible in different ways or to different things, I think is smart because it still gives them some kind of recourse when they're being pressured, or particularly against aerial moves. Now that so many of these characters have DPs that are just fully invincible to airborne moves, that's to me like in the spirit of how a DP should function. It should be an overwhelmingly powerful anti-air option and an occasionally good get out of a bad situation reversal option, but only in situations where you guess properly or where your opponent has maybe mistimed a pressure string and left too big of a gap. And that's how DPs function now, at least on paper. We'll see how it plays out, in a competitive climate. The second thing that I'm really happy about is that they reverted some of the, in my opinion, just silly overreaching nerfs to certain characters, normals. Characters like Birdie, or who I play, Alex, and Fang, all saw some of their far-reaching, really strong, solid pokes get nerfed with, 1 or 2 frame reductions in speed. Almost across the board, they reverted those back to Season 1 values. The only one that I think didn't get reverted back is Alex's Crouching Strong, but that's still an amazingly good button for him at the speed that it's at now. It didn't really need the 1 frame back in order to continue being a viable tool, but other stuff like his standing medium kick or Fang's standing roundhouse, for instance, were really hurt in the Season 2 patch. So I'm glad they dialed that back to Season 1 values. Really good. And then third, and this is more of an overall thing, I'm glad that it didn't do this new patch doesn't do too much to the overall power rankings. It definitely takes some characters like Urien, who seemed, by some people's standards, really, really, really overly strong and maybe a little bit too safe. And dial them down a little bit, but without completely diminishing their possibilities and their overall tactics and kind of what makes them entertaining and interesting to play as and to watch, which I think is really, really important. Like, you want dynamic, interesting characters like Urien to be strong and to be represented well on the competitive scene, because they're interesting characters for the spectators to see, and that kind of drives viewership and growth. So I'm glad they didn't clip the wings of some of those characters too much. I think it'll be more fair, but you'll also still see, it still feels like a fresh new game. Like, they didn't undo everything they did and suddenly go, okay, now everyone's back to Season 1 levels. Characters like Balrog, like, they barely touched Balrog. He's got all the same dirt that he had before, except he's got slightly less health, like 25 less health. So, Balrog will still be the same problem that he was before. Laura, again, they tweaked 1 or 2 little things, but it's not like anything that's going to totally ruin her high momentum offensive play, which makes her so dangerous and so entertaining entertaining to watch. So I'm glad that they brought some people in line a little bit more, but without going too nuts. And the characters, again, like I mentioned before, who got kind of overly clipped, like Alex, got a little bit of love to make them feel a little bit like, is Alex suddenly or Fang going to suddenly become a top tier competitive character? Not at all, but at least playing them, you won't feel like you're playing with two hands tied behind your back, and that's kind of what you want to avoid. So overall, I think a step in the right direction. Their biggest misstep, I think, of the entire patch is just not saying anything at all about, the now infamous input lag. Like, we're at a point now where I think everyone needs to know if Capcom feels that this is a by design thing and it's part of their vision for the game, which, I wouldn't love, but, that's fine. If that's the reality, then we just want to know it. And if it's not, if it's something they plan on fixing, even if they don't have a timeline for that, it would be great for them to acknowledge that and let people know, because obviously I think at this point it's more of an optics problem than anything else. In order to create the perception that they're going to continue to support the game and listen to player feedback, I think they need to address kind of the elephant in the room.
Vince Ingenito, formerly of the Imagine Games Network, Alex player in Street Fighter V, Dudley player in Street Fighter 4. He great Street Fighter mind, former competitor too, if you don't know, in games like Marvel and I believe Persona. Had some great thoughts about this new patch. I know he doesn't like invincible meterless reversals. The last time I was in San Francisco for a day, I got to hang out with Vince and we played a little bit of Street Fighter V, and it was rough because I don't have my invincible get off me attack, and he loves it. Especially as an Alex player, I think. But, and while we don't agree on whether those invincible meterless reversals should be in the game, I think it's fair. I do appreciate the fact that he thought that the change that was implemented for Season 2 was a little bit overboard, and bringing it back just a little bit is good. So, I guess thanks for that, Vince. I'll never convince you that those invincible meterless reversals should be back. I know this, but it is what it is. Now, the direction, he and I think, are on the same page as far as the direction of this patch. This is not a patch to change the way the whole game is supposed to be played. It's, if I remember right, last year, Capcom did, I guess, a couple small tweaks, things that were maybe not functioning the way they should have been, or maybe abused. But overall, this patch right now, look, they did their major patch. They did their major update for Season 2. This patch kind of brings some things in line. I feel like all along they wanted to gather some data after Season 2 and say, all right, what do we need to do to make sure this game is probably the most optimal it can be right now? So I think that's what they're doing in this patch, and I agree. Like, some of the changes, buffing Alex, really looking at some of the characters that were nerfed and bringing them back in line to what they were in Season 1, and sort of closing the gap on the tiers. I think it's a great move, and like I said earlier, we'll see how this game evolves month over month, and I can't wait for that. Now, Vince talked about input delay, and I agree that Capcom should definitively give us an answer on whether or not input delay as it is intended, and whether or not it's going to stay that way or not. Having said that, I'm not really concerned that it wasn't addressed in this patch. In the past, Capcom has said that input delay will remain unchanged, but I think people still want to hear a response, I guess a definitive response. I don't know. They've said as much. So I know people still want that input delay changed, especially top players. Having said that, I feel like this is a thing that's just not going to happen. I don't have any sources that can confirm or deny it. I don't think input delay is going to change, especially this year. So if they do decide to do that, we've already had 2 updates for season 2. It's not going to happen, I think. But I do agree with the idea that Capcom should just come out and say, just definitively, just say, look, this is what was intended for the game. This is how it is. Let's move on. We're not changing it. Let's move on, and everyone go play the game, do the best you can possibly do, and win some Capcom Pro Tour points. I don't know. So I'm not overly concerned that input delay wasn't addressed with this patch. I do think it should happen at some point, but right now, I'm not too worried about it.
Overall, I think they're going in the right direction with this patch. They definitely buffed some of the weaker characters without nerfing the stronger characters too much. And you can tell characters like Ryu got some of their Season 1 stuff back, like the range on his normals. Fang has a 6-frame crouching medium punch now he can use to punish overheads, which are like, I think, -6 almost all across the board in Season 2. I remember Shen was kind of bummed out about that, but they got that back. I don't think he's going to go back to Fang, but definitely it makes his pocket character that much stronger. So there were a few strange decisions. Every patch has those, but I don't think they're game breaking, which is good. So the big one is Cammy getting an air throw, which, Cammy's already been a strong character, so it seems like she's a character that keeps on getting buffed. But I don't think she's like Street Fighter 4 Yun level of getting way too buffed. The air throw, we'll see how much it affects her play. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was a good patch. But of course, people are going to have different opinions about if did these characters get buffed enough or did they get nerfed enough. Some characters didn't get touched according to the patch notes, but that can still change. I was really happy to see the rationale for the changes in the patch notes. Not every company does that, so it's really nice to see what they're thinking when they make these patch notes. And a lot of it made sense. Some stuff I didn't agree with completely, but I could see where they're coming from. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. As for having a patch mid-season like this, it does derail a lot of the new strategies that the pro players are coming up with. For casual people like me, Super Platinum, Akuma, it's not a huge thing. My character got 25 extra health, so I guess I'm happy. But generally speaking, I think it would make some of the pro player lives harder because they just spent all this time discovering this new stuff, and now they have to go back in the lab and see if all of it still works.
All right, thanks Gerald for those comments. Great breakdown of the patch. I agree that this is a good patch overall. I like the idea of bringing the tiers closer together, that top tier ceiling kind of coming down just a little bit, and the bottom tier coming up a lot for some characters, maybe not so much for others. Ryu, RIP. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good patch. I think it's good that if we get this patch and let the game ride, it'll be fine. I don't want to see too much interference like we see in other scenes or other games. So having said that, I want to touch on a couple specific things. Fang obviously buffed, kind of reverting back to Season 1. Gerald talked about Xian maybe going back or not. Xian's not going to go back. We spoke recently. He'll play Ibuki. He'll ride that out for CPT 2017. But Fang is a great pocket character for Xian. He almost brought him out in Winners Finals against Fudo at final round when he was down 2-0, but he was riding the momentum of Ibuki, so he thought he'd stick with her. He thought he'd stick with Ibuki. However, NuckleDu actually told him that he should have played his Fang against NuckleDu because he also plays Armika. Apparently, Fang is a great matchup for Armika and Chun-Li, according to Xian. So, there's times where he may break him out, but he'll ride out the season with Ibuki, and that's probably the best choice for him, as you'll see a feature going up soon about that. One last thing. Pro players. adapting to this patch. Like I said, we don't want to see too many patches messing with the game. I liked how last year the game evolved and the players evolved with it. I don't want to see sort of the reverse happen where the Capcom's forcing the players to evolve to constant patches and changes. I want to see the players just evolve with the game again. And this patch is, I think, early enough in the season that we don't have to worry about that so much. Pro players are going to adapt. Daigos, Tokitos, Ciens, Momochis, all these guys are great. They've been great forever. They don't have to break this game down like a lot of us do. Gerald mentioned casuals like himself. Super Platinum Akuma, is that casual? I don't know. I'm casual. Super Silver Kolin over here. One day to the next. Anyway, it takes longer for us to break this game down and get better. So with new players, beginning players, or casual players, I can see it being an issue. But overall, I think it helps all of us because the game, I don't know, this patch kind of, like I said, it closes the tiers, but it also, I think, closes the gap on how much time and how much better you actually need to be decent at this game. And Cien talked about that with me too, about the fact that he wants to see this game appeal to more new and casual players because, you know what, it's interesting. You stay interested in this game if you're doing well at it. So again, guys, thank you so much. Vince Ingenito, former IGN and fighting game enthusiast. I appreciate your comments. Born Free, you can follow Vince at Vincognito on Twitter. And Born Free, of course, thank you so much. He's at Born Free Tweets. And don't forget to check out his YouTube channel, youtube.com/bornfreeyt. And lastly, Gerald Lee at Core Gaming, doing great stuff. Both he and Born Free are doing fantastic video work. Some of my favorite stuff in the FGC. Core Gaming on Twitter for Gerald, as well as Core Gaming on YouTube. So be sure to check that stuff out. Lastly, though, I would just want to say, you've heard from myself, you've heard from Gerald, you've heard from Born Free, you've heard from Vince. Now I want to hear from you. What do you guys think about this patch? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it fair? Is it unfair? Is it too soon for another patch? Should we have another? Should we have more? I don't know. You tell me. I want to hear what you think about this patch, what you think maybe happened to your characters, what you think are the good or bad characters or buffs, nerfs to these characters. Let us know in the comments on YouTube. And of course, you can tweet at me at Bizarro_Mike, 1Z2Rs. And I lied, one more thing. Don't forget, Conversations and Fireballs every week, a nice virtual casual fireside chat with FGC players and personalities. That and I Got Next every week. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.